G'day viewers, how are you? I feel like it's so long since I've done this. Been a little bit slack and had a few technical things stopping me from making the videos, but I'm here. But man, how much has happened since I've done it? It's just like, what do I even choose to talk about? There is so much that has happened. Big and small, local and global. There are so many things to choose from. And yet, there's the same things that keep coming back. Like, obviously, in America, and this affects the rest of the world, is the Trump shit show, which just continues to be a truly astounding shit show, defying all expectations. In Australia, the politics is just for ages now, it's just centered around two things. The politicians who keep falling foul of the rule in our constitution that says you can't be a dual citizen and serve in Parliament, and the idea of whether same-sex marriage should be legal in Australia. So that's still the biggest things here. And I mean, when you look at Trump, I mean, you know, well, even the number of things he gives you to talk about, like when he pardoned the notoriously racist Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and just took all sorts of shit. Like, it's very interesting to look at the history behind the American presidents have power to pardon people for federal crimes. It's usually been done to heal rifts, you know, pardon people who were facing prosecution after the Civil War, for instance, or, you know, someone like Jimmy Carter pardoning Vietnam draft dodgers. And then there's the more questionable ones, like Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon, which a lot of people think cost him any chance of re-election. And the thing that they often do these days is sneak in a bunch of pardons just when they're leaving, like right at the end of their term. Like Obama, for instance, pardoned Chelsea Manning, and pardoned a bunch of non-violent marijuana drug offenders who were in jail for no good reason. Trump, very early in his day, does a really unorthodox pardoning, which even Republicans are criticising. Arpaio was found guilty of contempt of court for refusing to stop being a racist fucking shitbag. Because, I mean, when you're a racist fucking shitbag, that's just who you are. And everything about this is so weird. Like, people who defend Arpaio, like, he is unashamedly and proudly racist, targeting Latinos just because of their physical appearance, not because they are any more likely to have committed a law or to be an illegal immigrant. And his bullshit criminal activity cost taxpayers well north of $100 million. There's like nothing good to recommend him unless, like Trump, you're a fucking racist who loves racists. And it's like, when you're looking at the way Trump's been pandering to white supremacists, outright swastika-waving Nazis, etc., is going like, is he just pandering to those people to piss people off, or because he knows they're a hardcore base of issues? But then you look at Trump's history, and particularly with his Klansman dad, you just go, no, Trump actually just is a racist. He's just your common garden variety racist. He's literally a white supremacist. He thinks white people are by definition better than non-white people. He thinks non-white people are by definition more likely to be criminals or bad people, because he's a fucking racist. It's that simple. And yeah, there's all sorts of undercurrents and messages in him pardoning Arpaio. He's just basically telling everyone who's probably worried about the Russia probe, among other things, like, don't worry, when you get convicted, I'll just pardon you. And he seems to think he can even pardon himself. But what I found interesting is the Republican lawmakers like Paul Ryan and a few others saying this was a bad thing to do. This is against the rule of law. He shouldn't have done this. It's like something barely approaching a spine in them. And to my mind, there's only one reason they would be doing that, is because they think Trump will eventually go down. His criminality, and there's no getting around the fact Trump is clearly a criminal and will be convicted of criminal acts. They think, well, I can badmouth him now, so when he finally goes down, they're not going to impeach him because they're fucking cowards, but they know he's going to go down on a criminal charge, so when that finally happens, they can go, but see, remember? I spoke out against him. I said he did bad things. Please don't look at me with that same criminal investigative microscope, please. Let's just say it was just Trump. You know, they're fucking spineless. And look, for all his flaws, and his flaws are many, you got to give it to Trump. He really highlighted what spineless fucking worms politicians tend to be. He's focused on the Republicans, but he did it to the Democrats too. The Democrats were too weak to take him down. But what he did to the Republican Party was astounding. And he treated them like shit, and they didn't know what to do. And then he won, and then the people he treated like shit, who did eventually speak out against him, came crawling back. I mean, honestly, that had to feel pretty good for Trump to have people like Paul Ryan, Ted Cruz, and several others who he just shat all over come crawling back to him when he had power. It really showed how pathetic they are, and he did show how pathetic the media are. I was trying to think of another word, but I'm just going to go with disgusting. What he does with this whole fake news thing, behaving like fucking Tin Pot Benito Mussolini, bad, disgusting, vile, and damaging to society and the world as a whole. But the media are spineless, and he did show that up. He conned them into giving him millions of dollars of free publicity. And then when he won, when it became clear he was possibly going to win, but even after he won, when they realised what they had created, and all of the media are complicit in the existence of President Trump, it was too late. They tried to speak out, and they've lost all credibility. He played them, and he won, and they lost. There's no two ways about it. As much as I despise Trump, and I despise him, he won. He beat the politicians. He beat the media. He made them his fucking playthings. And they don't know how to deal with it. And they're still failing. I don't know if you've noticed the increasing trend to say, you know who's as bad as actual white supremacists and swastika-waving Nazis? People who fight against them. As if the only problem with fascists was they're a bit rowdy and violent. That's not the problem. The problem is they're fascists. So you a bit weak-kneed about people punching fuck out of fascists, boo-hoo, punching fascists not as bad as being fascists, okay? Pretty simple, but people don't get it. And then the Trump shit show continued with the floods in Texas. Awful floods, and seeing it in a major centre, you know, like this is going to cost billions, and Trump's fucked up everything about it, but his hardcore supporters still love him. They still love him. He can't do anything wrong. It's really bizarre. Like, he fucked up everything about these Texas floods, and his supporters not blinking. Trump's going to donate $1 million. No, he's not. That's a fucking lie. If any money goes to the relief effort, it'll be from one of his sham foundations, which are a fucking tax dodge that he actually uses to steal money from charities. Just look into it, what his family have done with charitable donations, funneling it back through his foundations to pay Trump businesses instead of paying the charities. It's a fucking scam, and you're a fucking moron if you don't realise that. But yeah, it's not even like Trump's the worst thing that's happened to Texas. That's just embarrassing. The floods are awful. It's been great seeing people help. But the weirdest shit to me, I don't know if you saw those pictures of floating fire ant islands. With the flooding, fire ants, they form clusters and they just float on the water. Could you imagine if you're coming out of your house going, glub glub, the water's this thick, oh my god, I've got to get to safety. What's that red thing floating? And you don't die the way you expected. You die because a little floating island of fire ants landed on your head, and the last thing you did was die in horrible pain from hundreds of fire ant bites. That's just excessive as far as I'm concerned. And then there was that chemical plant that exploded and might explode more, and the person won't even see what the chemicals are or how dangerous they are. I mean, is anyone else seeing, like, you know, a Marvel superhero or supervillain origin story? Floating fire ants and exploding chemical factories? I don't think this is going to end well. But what about Australia? Well, we had our first TV commercial opposing the idea of marriage equality. Now, what's happening in Australia, if you haven't picked up on it before, is the government has decided there should be some sort of public vote on the question. Even though there's no constitutional need for this, they only have to do an act of parliament, even though there is obviously going to be a massive campaign of hate against marriage equality, they said, let's do it anyway. And then they couldn't get an actual formal plebiscite vote up because they couldn't get the votes for it. So they've just gone with this ridiculous thing. It's a postal vote. It's non-binding. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a, let's see what people think with a postal vote that's like unsecure, is not compulsory, is flawed in so many ways, not least that it's going to cost over $120 million as well. There is basically nothing to recommend this approach. It's really fucking stupid. But that kind of sums up this government as well. Anyway, we had our first TV commercial from the No campaign this week. And surprise, surprise, it was nothing but lies and irrelevancies. They didn't actually focus on should same-sex couples have the right to be married. You know, should they be regarded as equal under the law? Should we treat them like people? That's what it's about. No, they went on to, oh, you know what could happen? The kids, the boys could be wearing dresses. Oh, I could be forced to do this, that, and the other. No, none of that is real. Literally everything about this ad was lies. And you're not, when you vote for marriage equality, you're not voting for changing education in schools. You're not voting for anything about freedom of speech. You are literally and only voting as to whether same-sex couples should be regarded as equal. And if you say otherwise, you are either stupid or a liar. Now, I've got to try really hard to be as reasonable as I can. And that's difficult because, exactly as I said, there is no rational ground for opposing marriage equality. There isn't even a solid religious ground. There is only bigotry. If you are saying you're going to vote no, you have to own up. Your reason for saying this is, ew, the gays, they're so icky. That is why you're doing it. Unless you are an ultra-Orthodox Jew, you can't cite the Bible. People who quote the Jewish books of law and say, see, it's an abomination. You don't follow the Jewish books of law. You don't even keep kosher, let alone all the other laws you're supposed to follow. The idea of selectively pulling out bits and saying, I'm going to say this is important, but ignore literally 99% of what's there. If your beliefs were even close to true, you'd be going straight to hell for that level of hypocrisy. And for the lies and the, oh, the children and the, oh, you'd be forced to do this and you'll be forced to do that. Bearing false witness, ever heard that? That's one of the 10 commandments, okay? That's the thing. You don't even have a solid religious basis for opposing marriage equality. It is nothing but bigotry and ignorance. Full stop. And honestly, I'd have slightly more time for people who own up to that and saying, yeah, I don't want it because gays are gross, okay? At least you're being honest. Anyone who says anything else needs to take a good, hard look in the mirror. Either own up to your fucking bigotry or wake the fuck up. Because there is no other reason. All these ridiculous nonsensical arguments. People go, oh, the definition of marriage, the Bible of marriage. Biblical and historical figures did all sorts of weird marriages that weren't one man, one woman. There's multiple wives. There's multiple remarriage. Yet there is no logical reason to oppose marriage equality. There is only bigotry. And when you look at what the No campaign has done so far, it's just been lies. So when your primary campaign is to lie and to trick people, saying, oh no, you know what you should do? You should vote against political correctness. Like fuckbag Tony Abbott. Or I should actually say the cunt Tony Abbott, because in a bright spot in Australia, it was found to be officially legal to call Tony Abbott a cunt. There's a local identity, colourful local identity, this old guy who has signs saying various things, trying to make people smile. He sits outside the train station, and he had one in support of refugees opposing Tony Abbott when he was Prime Minister, and he said it was something along the lines of, you know, people should show compassion, but Tony, you can't. And he did a little pun, and instead of an A, he had an upside down. It was a U with a line across, so like he's going to see it's just an upside down U, but it's saying Tony, you cunt. And he got charged with obscenity for doing this, and the trial finally ended, and the judge said, well, I'm not going to find him guilty of obscenity because I think basic public standards, most people aren't going to be deeply offended by him saying that. I like to think that it's not calling people cunts in general that is acceptable. I think it's when someone really is a total cunt. Like, okay, they've just gone, well, we looked at it and Tony Abbott, absolute cunt. I mean, you've really got to acknowledge the fact that it's not being offensive to call him a cunt. You're just saying what everyone knows. Tony Abbott is a total cunt. And what he's doing with the marriage equality talk is just one example of it. But he's basically an absolutely worthless piece of shit. And yes, I'm thinking two things of the number of times I've said cunt. One is people saying, wow, aren't you worried about the whole being friendly to advertiser thing on YouTube? No, I'm not even monetizing my videos at the moment, because fuck that. Why should I work? Because I only get a few cents off them anyway. So it's not something I even care about. And, you know, you can trick maybe the algorithm are going to be hidden if they know I say cunt a lot. So you can trick the algorithm by doing thumbs up, and they go, ooh, and commenting, because this guy's really popular. Everyone wants to hear, and it can be a cunning plan on our part. The other thing is, of course, people saying, I don't like using the word cunt as a derogatory because it traditionally means the female genitalia, and what's wrong with that? Nothing! I'm a huge fan of cunts in the literal sense. Some of my best times have involved being intimate with a woman's cunt. But it's the way I was brought up. I don't know. It was always just the worst insult to say something. And if someone wants to admonish me for using it as an insult, you make a fair point. It's just the way I talk. And if you have a big problem with it, then you're probably just going to have a big problem with me. And there's no point in sticking around. I don't care. People say, if you're going to say cunt is a bad thing, I'm not going to watch your videos. That is a perfectly legitimate response. And you should probably just do that, because me changing the way I talk is really unlikely. So, yeah, if you are on the fence, to just roll it back a bit, back to the marriage equality thing in Australia, if you are on the fence as to, well, you know, I don't like the idea of my life being impinged upon, I think political correctness has gone too far, I think I'm not allowed to say anything. Those are all smoke screens. If you are a person of any integrity whatsoever, you need to think about this and acknowledge the vote is about one thing and one thing only. Should same-sex couples be regarded as equal? Should they be regarded as real people? Should they have basic rights and dignity? Okay? That is the beginning, middle, and end of the vote. Anything else is a smokescreen. Anything else is a lie. If you have any integrity whatsoever, you won't hide behind smokescreens. You won't hide behind lies. You will either vote in support of marriage equality, or you'll be honest and say same-sex couples do not deserve basic rights, because that is the one thing that the vote is about, and that is the one thing that should be debated. If you're doing anything else, you're just like Tony Abbott, you're a total cunt.